I'm John Duval. This is the Scriptural Way Bible Study.
Lord, we come before Thee.
The Scriptural Way Bible Study is brought to you by the Seminole Point Church of Christ, located at 16300 North May Avenue, Oklahoma City. On behalf of the elders and members of the Seminole Point Church of Christ, I would like to thank you for your interest in spiritual matters. Now, let's take our Bibles and seek the Scriptural way. Good evening. Welcome to the Scriptural Way broadcast. I am John Duval.
And I'm Dale Decker.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dale, we are missing John for one more week tonight.
Yeah, John's in Washington, D.C. I hope he straightens those people out up there.
Well, me too. I'm not sure if he's there for that, but I am too. Thank you so much for joining us for our study tonight. It is always a wonderful opportunity, Dale, whenever we can come together to study the Word of God, isn't it?
It sure is.
It most certainly is. Travis, it's good to see you this evening. I hope that you are doing well. I'm doing better than what I was doing Sunday night. Dale had to fill in for me. My voice decided to take an early vacation.
And it's still kind of missing.
It is. It's about 75% back. So we'll try to keep the coughing and so forth down to a minimum this evening. Listen, we want you to know, as always, that your interest in spiritual matters, your interest in scriptural matters means a great deal to us. And as always, we appreciate it so much when you're willing to and are able to join us for such studies. You know, Dale, I do want to kind of remind them, just by way of reminder, that if they miss any of our broadcasts or our Bible studies, they're all available on the Scriptural Way website.
That is very true.
All you do is click on previous broadcast.
Exactly right.
Yep.
They're all there, and feel free to look at any one of them, and even with the past ones, if you have a question about anything that we say or do, please send it in to us, and we'll be glad to respond to it.
You know, and I think that's a very good point to make note of, especially, and do us this favor. If you're watching a previous study and you question something or disagree with something, let us know what episode it was that you were viewing. You kind of let us know, so that way we can go back and reference what it was we said and can kind of listen to it a little bit as well. And we'd be more than happy to study with you from the Word of God. As we'll cover a little bit later through our announcements, the Scriptural Way broadcast is brought to you by the Seminole Point Church of Christ, located in Edmond, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma City. And if you live in our area, we'd love for you to come and be our guests. Dale, before we continue with the study, last week we stepped into our lesson number 8, adding to our brotherly kindness, love. And we had worked through the introduction of that, and we began talking about the importance of love within our lives. But we had a question that was sent in during the study itself, but I didn't see the question until after the study. So I emailed the person that attended the study and let them know that we would be covering the question again tonight. So if you're viewing, we're going to look at your question. And this question came from one of our viewers from the Philippines. Dale?
Yes.
It was the wife of Brother Nardo, I believe is his first name, or last name, Rosalita Nardo, is his wife, had sent us a question. And so I'm going to read the question that she sent to us, and then we'll kind of talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll resume with where we left off. But understand we're talking about love. And she wrote, is this the right, quote, term to say we love God unconditionally, as the same as how we love our family? You know, and I'd never considered the question as to whether or not our love for God is an unconditional love. And could we even say that we love God unconditionally, like we love our family?
Well, it's certainly a good question, and you and I have discussed it this afternoon, obviously. And the one thing that we do know is if you look at John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And this was certainly an unconditional love, just as parents. I know myself being a parent, and John, you being a parent, we decided to bring children into the world, and we love those children unconditionally. But on the other hand, the child did not come into this world loving us. In fact, all the child wanted was to be fed and had their diaper changed.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And whether or not the child develops a love for us is going to be based upon the conditions of how we treat that child.
That's exactly right. If we treat the child bad, the child's never going to learn to love us.
That's right.
But if we treat the child with genuine love, agape love, the child is going to learn to reciprocate in the same way. So there are, you'd have to say, some conditions there as far as the child developing that agape love.
That's right. Yeah, I think about a child that's adopted. An adopted child may live, 20 years with adopted parents and love them so much. And then one day his birth mom or birth dad may come along and say, "Hey, come here, give me a hug. Don't you just love me?" And he'd say, "No, I don't love you." There's no reason to love him as love as a parent, because they did nothing to earn, to warrant, to establish that love within him. It was his adopted parents who did. Now, what does this do? How does this relate to our love for God? Well, I would suggest that our love for God is not an unconditional love. We are not born into this world automatically loving God. And a person who is not a Christian doesn't love God. And the person who's not a Christian doesn't develop a love for God until he has learned what God has done for him through sending Christ to die upon the cross of Calvary. Once he then begins to learn from God what God has done so that he might be saved, he then can begin to love God because of his faith and conviction and persuasion in the evidence found in the Word of God. He then begins to love God because of what God has done for him in giving him salvation. Now, this is not to say that an individual can say, "Well, God, if you'll give me," as we're talking about earlier, "God, if you'll give me a Cadillac, I'll love you all the more." It doesn't work that way. We're talking about what God's already done. And if we take opportunity of that salvation afforded to us by the one who loved the world and sent his son to die upon the cross of Calvary, then we obey him because we love him. Let's look at a couple verses here, and I've got some of these printed out. And Travis, if you have a moment, we'll turn to some of these. And Dale, you've got some as well. And we'll do just a few minutes of back and forth discussion, because I think this is a very good question. And by the way, Brian is with us from Edmond. John was with us from up in Washington. He's having a little bit of video or internet trouble, so he's going to log back on. And Brother Nardo is with us as well, again from the Philippines.
And we welcome you.
Most certainly. One of the verses that I found quite interesting is in 1 John 4:19. Now, we're jumping into the middle of the context of this, and preferably you need to go back and look at the whole context of this. But I want to focus on 1 John 4:19, where he says, "We love him because he first loved us." Now, this is establishing for us why we love God. We love God because he loved us first and sent his son to die upon the cross of Calvary. So one might say, Dale, I think that is a condition. Because of what God has done for us, we love him. If a person looks at the biblical facts and they don't believe them, then they don't believe what God has done for them. And therefore, they won't recognize God's love for them, and they're not going to love God.
Well, that's true. In fact, just as a child learns to love their parents, a child has to learn to love God, too, because when a child's born,
That's right.
the child doesn't know God, doesn't know who he is, what he's done for him, or even that he exists.
That's right.
And so unless someone teach him, it goes back to the Ethiopian eunuch when he was studying there, and Philip came up to him, and Philip said, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And Ethiopian eunuch said, "How can I, unless somebody teach me?"
Right.
Well, this is the same thing with a child. He has to be taught, and as he's taught, then he learns to love because of the things that's been done for him.
Absolutely. And the thing that we know about God, he will never do anything that would disallow that love on our part. We can walk away from the love of God, and his love, albeit is unconditional, it doesn't keep us from our punishment and the consequences of our sins. But God will never do anything that'll run us away, you might say.
That's true.
And so we're talking basically past tense on what God has already done or made available. One more verse here in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 14 through 15. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 14. He says, "For the love of Christ compels us, because we judge thus, that if one died for all, then all died. And he died for all, that those who live should live no longer for themselves, but for him who died for them and rose again." Kind of playing on the phrase there, "for the love of Christ compels us." You know, it's kind of heading in that direction of being somewhat conditional. And let's see. Let's go to Ephesians 2, verse 4 real quick. And then I'm gonna pass the baton back to you, Dale.
You think so?
I will. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 4 there. He says, "But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. And raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace and his kindness towards us in Christ Jesus." Now, my point is this. You're talking to someone who's not a Christian. You say, "Look at what God's done for you." You know, and hopefully that person, based upon the conviction and belief, will say, "Then I love God and I'll obey him." Anyway, Dale, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. There are a couple of verses that I looked at and I think's noteworthy. A lot of verses I got came out of the Gospel according to John, because John wrote a lot about the love of Christ. But in Luke, chapter 6, verse 32 says, "But if you love those who love you, what credit is it what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them." Well, obviously, the kind of love we're talking about is agape love, the love that we're willing to lay our lives down. In fact, Jesus made this comment. He said in John 15, verse 13, he says, "Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." That's the same thing the parents would do for their children if they truly love their child. And certainly they brought them in the world, and obviously they love them. God loved us, as we've mentioned in John 3:16, but also in John the 14th chapter, verse 15. I like the American Standard Version of this myself, because John 14, verse 15 says, "If you love me, ye will keep my commandments."
Yeah.
You don't do it because you have to. You don't do it because you expect God to do something for you, as we mentioned a while ago. If you give me a Cadillac, I'll love you more.
Right.
But if you truly love God for the things that he's done for you, sending his only begotten Son to die upon the cross that we might have everlasting life, promising us salvation. I always hear this phrase, the hope of salvation. It's not a hope, it's a promise.
That's right.
It's a promise if you're faithful to him. And if you truly understand these things, then you will keep his commandments. And John 14, verse 21 says, "He who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him." So
now, read that verse again, Dale, because I want to make a point here with that. I think it's a good verse.
"He who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him."
All right, now when we talk about God's love being unconditional for the world, we do need to make a difference or distinguish between the world and Christians, because that passage right there definitely says that God's love for us is conditioned upon our love for the Lord, our love for Christ. You know, and you know, I think that's something that we need to point out, that God's love for his children, for those who answer the gospel's call in salvation, from this point, it is his love for us in a way is conditioned upon our love for Christ.
Well, yeah, in a way.
In a way. I mean, it's not like pardon me. It's not like if we walk away from him, he says, "Okay, I hate you, I'll never take you back." You know. He'll always take us back if we're willing to repent and come back to him. But it's an interesting statement Jesus made there, and that's I just thought it was.
Yeah, in fact, if you skip verse 22 and you look at verse 23 of John chapter 14, it says, "Jesus answered and said to him, If anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him."
Absolutely. I think that's a good point there, and it distinguishes why Christians are different than those of the world. Yeah.
And then it goes on in verse 24, "He who does not love me does not keep my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me."
That's right. So there, it's all we must love Christ.
Exactly right.
Yeah. But now, our brother Nardo makes a very good point. From Matthew 22:37, he said, Jesus answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength." Matthew or Mark's account will go and say in strength as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what is interesting, we say that we're commanded to love the Lord, but in reality, we are, and I don't dispute that, we are to love Him. But it is not a compelled love. Well, we got to love the Lord. It is a love because of what He has done for us. Because we love Him because He first loved us. 1 John 4:19. But Brother Nardo makes a good point in that he tells us how to love Him and how much of us is to love Him.
Well, he tells us how to love our friends, how to love our enemies.
Yeah, but I was talking about with our love towards God, though.
Well, that's true.
But the love that, and here's a kicker: the way that He's loved us is how we're supposed to love our friends and our enemies.
But when you get right down to it, that's why we're studying basically
That's
1
right.
Corinthians chapter 13, because Paul tells the Corinthian brethren how to love.
That's right, and I think it's a great layout of the agape love.
It is.
It's a great layout of it. All righty. Well, I didn't intend to take that long, but I think it's a good question.
It was a good question.
A good question there. And one more thought, and I think we covered this. A parent's love for a child is unconditional, but not acceptant of the child's behaviors. If a child does well, the parent will praise the child. If the child does bad, the parent must punish the child. Why? Because of his unconditional love. And if the child goes and robs a bank, the parent can't hide the child. He's got to let the child suffer the consequences for his actions.
Parent can still love the child and
yes.
hurt for the child,
but
the child has to suffer the consequences.
That's right. That's right. All righty. Well, Sister Nardo, I appreciate the question that you have sent in, and I'll try to check our email more through the course of this study. But let's jump in with where we left off last time. We were looking at, in our discussion of love, we had talked about the importance of love, and let me jump ahead. We were talking about the characteristics of love.
Yes.
And we looked at the fact that that we must have patience, and we showed that kindness is a characteristic of love. And I meant to have my abbreviated copy so I could thumb to it faster. We showed that love is liberal. Love is liberal in that it does not envy, it suffers long, and is kind, it is not grieved. And that brought us up to the fourth characteristic of love, Dale. And what is that?
That is that love does not parade itself or is not puffed up. That's in verse 4 of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And basically what it's talking about here is the fact that love does not make a display of itself. It does not sound a trumpet. And in fact, Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 2, says, "Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." And this is exactly what Paul's talking about here in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, is that we should have love, but we don't have to go around advertising it.
Yeah.
People will see the love in us through our actions and through our words.
I think that's a good point. It doesn't seek its own self-glorification.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. It's equated to pride, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, oftentimes people get so puffed up because they want recognition, and they fail to realize that love doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't have so much pride that it goes about trying to win everybody's attention or everybody's affection. And in fact, pride will ruin a person. Proverbs the 16th chapter, verse 18 says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." And then also the proverb writer says in Proverbs 18, verse 21 or 12, says, "Before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility." And that's truly what love brings about, is humility and not pride.
You wonder, Dale, and I think it's an excellent point there with that. You wonder if this pride issue stems from the envy issue we just talked about in the previous point.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're getting the attention from other people because you genuinely love them, and they pat you on the back and they love you, and you think, I want that too. So I go practice it. I go to pretend to have the love, but I'm only doing it for selfish reasons. And I may, in front of Travis, say, man, I love you, Dale. But then when you walk away, I think to myself, I can't stand that man.
You know, a classic example of what you're talking about is thinking of the example of two children, two siblings. And one is getting all the attention from the parents and everything. What does the other one do? Starts doing things to get attention as well. Of course, that's not love, but that's what we're talking about here. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. We don't do things to get attention. We do things because we love. We care for one another. We care for God, and that's why we do things.
That's right.
The proverb writer in Proverbs 29, verse 23 says, a man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor. And Paul, when he was talking to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 6, says that we should, and this of course is the qualifications for an elder, but he says an elder should not be a novice, lest being puffed up with pride he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. So obviously knowledge makes a big difference in one's life.
Dale, we need to take a break so I can recover.
Okay, take a break, John.
We'll be back in just a moment. Here's our first break.
Hello, I'm Ron Witt, one of the elders of the Seminole Point Church of Christ. On behalf of the elders and members of the Seminole Point Church of Christ, I would like to invite you to be our guest at any of our worship services and Bible classes. The meeting place of the Seminole Point Church of Christ is located at 16300 North May Avenue, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, zip code 73013. The Seminole Point Church of Christ meets Sunday mornings at 9:30 for Bible classes, 10:30 for worship service, and 5 p.m. for our afternoon worship service. We also have Bible classes on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. In addition to our regularly scheduled Bible classes and worship services, we also have a Bible class on Tuesday morning at 10, this live netcast at 7:30 p.m., and a ladies' Bible class which meets once a month. Whether you live in Oklahoma City area or you are traveling through Oklahoma City, we would love to have you come and be our guest. We have Bible classes for all ages. Now, let us return to our study.
Well, thank you for joining us again as we continue through the study. I think I'm in a measure of shape better than what I was a minute ago.
You are a little bit better than you were a minute ago. Hopefully we can keep you that way.
We're going to work towards that end now. And we continue, though, Dale. We're talking about humility being basically the way to real greatness.
Yeah, I mean,
being the choice.
When you look at love and what Paul was telling the Corinthian brethren here when he says love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, there's two choices. We either deal with pride or we deal with humility, and obviously humility is the way to real greatness. In fact, Matthew the 18th chapter, verses 1 through 4, this is a time where the disciples were questioning Jesus, and they said, who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child to him, set him in the midst of them, and said, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And again, that's Matthew 18, verses 1 through 4. That's a pretty strong statement, if you will, that Jesus said to his disciples. And if that didn't take a 2x4 and hit them across the head between the eyes and get their attention, nothing will, because they were still looking for Jesus to establish the earthly kingdom, obviously, and they're wondering what position are they going to hold in that kingdom. You know, are they going to reign over a specific city, a territory, or just what? And Jesus said, no, that's not the way it goes. You need to humble yourself, and that's the way to real greatness.
I think that's a good point. A very good point. In 1 Peter 5, verse 6, he says, therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
Yeah, and then, and certainly that's an important statement. And Paul, when he was talking to the Philippian brethren in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, he makes a very very important statement here. He said, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself." It's really important to think about that. You know, some people, you ask yourself, why do you become a member of a specific congregation? Some people become a member of a congregation because of the fact that they think maybe it might help them in their job. Right. They're expecting to get something from someone, or they're expecting specific relationships because of becoming a member here. Well, that's not why you become a member of a congregation at all. You become a member of a congregation because you want to work with that congregation, and you're not expecting anything. There's a love there that has to be there with your brethren without expecting anything in return.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to bring into the discussion here just a moment a couple thoughts that had come up in the chat room. And bear with me as we're trying to get things cleared out. Anyway, Brother Nardo made the point, and this kind of takes us back a little bit in our discussion, but not much. In quoting from Revelation chapter 3, verse 19, he says, "As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten," Jesus says. "Therefore be zealous and repent." Because of his love for us, he chastens us, going back to the idea of a parental, God's unconditional love demands punishment. Let's see. Then Neutron John, who's John Hall? He's with us tonight in the chat room. He says, good points. I think that what you're basically pointing to is, quote, what is our motivation? We must be sure that we're examining ourselves to ensure our motivations for our actions truly comes from love. So, and that's what we're talking about here in our love for one another. Then my darling daughter Sarah said, "Dad, I put a water bottle just outside the door."
That was so nice of her.
That was. I have one, but thank you, Sarah. And John goes on, we'll catch up here with this. As Rosalito points out in Revelation 3:19, God chastens us because of love. We chasten our children. We need to be sure the motivation is love in this and in all of our actions. Kind of bringing that back around there. And then evaluating, he goes on to say, the national level, never mind, that's what he's doing in Washington. All right. Well, I'll quit reading the chat room for a moment there. Don't want to give her anyways.
Well, those are all good points, and I'm glad that you folks are participating in the class tonight.
Absolutely. John, we need you back here, just, when
yeah,
when
especially tonight, John, because this John here is kind of weak and wobbly tonight.
Thanks, Dale.
You're welcome.
Speaking of love, did you know that another characteristic of love is courtesy, Dale?
I sure did. In fact, Paul, in verse 5 of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, says, "Love does not behave itself rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, and thinks no evil." The point is that love never acts out of its place or character. It observes good manners. Love is never rude. It's never bearish or brutish, and is ever willing to become all things to all men, that it may please them for their good to edification. I want to emphasize that, for their good to edification. Even the Apostle Paul said to the Corinthian brethren, he said, "I would refrain from eating meat if it caused my brother to stumble." Now, Paul had no problem with eating meat from idols, but what he did is demonstrated his love by saying, "I'm not going to cause any of my brethren to stumble because I have a little bit more education, more knowledge than they do. No ill-bred man or what is termed rude or unmannerly is a Christian. A man may have a natural bluntness or be a clown, and yet there be nothing boorish or hoggish in his manner. But courtesy is love in little things. It is not brutal, it's not boisterous or hoggish."
You think about what Titus 2 verse 3 says, in talking about our behavior. In this case, in point, says the older women likewise, they be reverent in behavior. We are to be holy within our behavior. And even the qualifications of a bishop says that a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, and hospitable. So
Exactly right. All good points.
definitely. Well, let's continue, Dale, with the sixth characteristic of love.
Well, that's also in verse 5, and what Paul's saying here is love does not seek its own. The point that Paul is making here is love is not desirous of her own spiritual welfare only, but of her neighbors also. And love is never satisfied but in the welfare, comfort, and salvation of all. That man is no Christian who is, or that man is no Christian who is solicitous for his own happiness alone and cares not how the world goes so that he is comfortable. Man is selfish if we neglect the good of others. And even Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 24, he says, let no one seek his own, but seek one the other's well-being.
Now, you know, Dale, this does kind of overlap a little bit. Our discussion earlier of the subject of love in regards to it not being out of pride, out of envy.
That is correct.
It's easy to love, and I think Brother Nardo made the point earlier here within the text that, and this is all enough, we didn't read it a while ago, I don't believe, but it's the idea that if you love those who love you, what do you have? What does it profit you if you love those who love you?
Well, that's what Jesus was saying.
Exactly.
Earlier.
And it's our love for other people must be something that is not seeking to gain something, purely unselfish. Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, the Apostle Paul, when he's writing to the church of Philippi, he said, let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others, for one another.
Yeah. So when you get right down to it, then, if love is not selfish, then love is satisfied only in the profit and salvation of others. In fact, Paul, when he said to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verses 32 and 33, he says, give no offense either to the Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many that they may be saved.
Therein showing, and as was mentioned in the chat room a while ago, showing motive.
Yeah, exactly right.
Showing motive. You know, I was going to mention, on our live stream, Dale, all right, we also make available an audio-only stream for people who have dial-up slow internet connections. And we have currently 2 people viewing via the audio-only stream.
Well, that might be my good friends in Clarksville, Tennessee. I hope so. Maybe someday they'll get that dinosaur dial-up system and put it away and get some high-speed internet.
They may do it yet, Dale. Well, let's move on in our characteristics of love, Dale. And so far, some of the things we've been talking about is love being courteous, love not being not being filled with pride, and we've talked about love not being selfish. But love is also a great governor in controlling our behavior, in controlling our reaction to things. You could say the 7th characteristic of love is that of a good temper. We might say a good temper.
That's correct. The New King James Version in verse 5 says, love is not provoked, but certainly he's talking about love is good temper. When you look at the Greek word here of what Paul's talking about here, he's talking about a man who is under the influence of love or religion is not prone to violent anger or exasperation. It is not his character to be hasty, to be excited or passionate. But instead, he is calm and he's serious, he's patient, he looks soberly at things, and though he may be injured, yet he governs his passions and restrains his temper, he subdues his feelings. Paul says this would be produced by love.
That's right. You know, I think of what, and we don't have this in the study outline, but I think what Paul wrote to Timothy, he said, actually to the church in Ephesus, be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down upon your wrath. Ephesians chapter 4 is where he said that. And the idea there is we will have to deal with the emotions of anger. We have to deal with those emotions because we will have them sometime in our lifetime. The key is to be angry and not to sin. And what we're talking about, and what Dale has so well described, is a governor on our emotions, is a governor on our anger, is not provoked, is what Paul says about love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. Think about what the proverb writer, Dale, said in Proverbs 16, verse 32.
Well, he said he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And obviously we must be slow to anger. Paul told Titus in Titus chapter 1, verse 7, for a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, but notice this, not quick-tempered.
Now, I want to throw something out there with that, Dale. When we look at the qualifications of elders or of pastors, of bishops, as we see here within the text, oftentimes people like to look at these qualifications as qualifications that are peculiar to these men. That these men are the ones that God expects to be this way, almost implying that no one else has to be. But when you look at the qualifications in both 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus chapter 1 that deal with the qualifications of elders, I'm going to say 95% of those qualifications God expects of every single Christian.
Well, in fact, James chapter 1, verse 19, he wasn't talking to bishops, and he wasn't giving the qualifications to bishops here. He says, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. So that applies to everyone.
Every single Christian.
Exactly right.
Someone says, well, what qualifications of the elders wouldn't apply? Well, if you're a wife, you can't be the husband of one wife.
Well, yeah.
If you're a child, you can't have your children in subjection, typically.
That's right. And a Christian doesn't have to be married. A Christian doesn't have to have children. They don't have to have believing children to be a Christian. But to be an elder, yes, you have to have believing children. You must rule your own household well. You must be the husband of one wife.
Yeah. But the rest of those are required of all of us,
Exactly
including, like what you said, and James is a great point, not letting go of our control of our anger.
That's correct.
That's right. I'm going to consult the chat room here real quick. And we have Jacob Gwynn from Columbia, Tennessee with us tonight.
Welcome, Jacob.
Well. And we may have others that I've not noticed and not mentioned. If you've just recently joined us, be sure to tell us who you are and where you are from. Brother Nardo makes a point again, or makes a good point again, in Matthew 10:37. In this one, it goes, if you love your father or mother, or even your sons and daughters more than me, you're not fit to be my disciple. Another good statement about love.
It sure is.
That's right. Well, let's step on now to our 8th characteristic of love.
But I want to just comment on that too, because if you have agape love, it's impossible for you to love someone else more than someone else, because agape love loves equally across the board. You might have phileo love for someone, you might have eros love for someone, you might have agape love. But what Jesus is talking about here is, if you have agape love, you're not going to love your mother and father more than you love me.
That's a good point. You love God, and then you love them.
Exactly right.
That's a good point. Now, what about justice, Dale?
Justice. Well, that's again in verse 5 of chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, and Paul says, love thinks no evil. It means to put the best possible construction on the motives and the conduct of others. It means that a person under the influence of love is not malicious, not censorious, disposed to find fault or to impute improper motives to others. It is not only not easily provoked, not soon excited, but it is not disposed to think that there was any evil intention, even in cases which might tend to irritate or exasperate us. When you get right down to it, true religion will always give the benefit of the doubt.
I think it's a good point. Oftentimes we are very, very quick to jump to conclusions or to assume the worst about someone, or to even think evil of that individual. And we cannot allow ourselves to do that. And oftentimes you might say that's even a mob mentality. Mm-hmm. Other people are talking this way. Well, they've got to be as bad as what everybody says they are. So I'm gonna think the same thing about them, and that just cannot be that way.
Yeah. When you think about what Paul's saying here, love thinks no evil. This is love that does not judge will pass over sins and will not tell everything. Again, going back to the proverb writer, Proverbs 10, verse 12, says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. And in Proverbs 17, verse 9, it says, he who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends.
Now, one thing I want to note, though, about the Proverbs 10:12 passage there, and even the thought of covering a transgression, love covers all sins, is not. We're not talking about if you love someone, then you'll overlook their sin.
No, it's talking about the fact that if you love someone, you're not going to go around saying to, hey, Travis, you know what John did yesterday?
That's right. Shh, don't tell him. Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. And it's, you have to look at the first part. Hatred stirs up strife, but what does love do? It covers it. It covers that which would cause strife. You are not one that caused strife.
That's right.
It covers all sins. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8, we read, and above all things have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. You know, and I think, and here's what I find interesting about both these verses in Proverbs 10:12, Proverbs 17:9, let's say all three verses, in 1 Peter 4:8, you have sins, transgressions, and sins found there. Not simple irritants, not simple, well, you know, you looked at me funny. Sins. And you think about what Christ said in Luke chapter 17, where he told them that if your brother sins against you, and he comes to you and says, forgive me, you forgive him. And if he comes to you 7 times in a day, and 7 times in a day, or if he sins against you 7 times in a day, and comes to you 7 times in a day and says, forgive me, you're supposed to forgive him. And the quality that allows that is love. So, just something to think about there.
Goes along a little bit with what your sermon was Sunday morning, though. You know, the person has to come and ask for forgiveness. You can let it go by and everything, but if truly the person wants to be forgiven, they have to ask for that forgiveness. Then it's our responsibility, if we truly love the individual, we love the souls of that individual, we're going to forgive them without any conditions here. We're not going to say, well, I'll forgive you, but... Now, that's not the way it goes. Love does not invent or devise evil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is just as God is just.
Exactly right.
Thinks no evil. All right, well, let's see. Let's continue. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and take our last break. And this one, you'll get a little more information about this congregation. And on the other side of it, we'll be looking at our 9th and final characteristic of love. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
Hi, I'm Rhonda. I'm a member of the Seminole Point Church of Christ in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Seminole Point Church of Christ has outstanding Bible classes for all ages. We have teachers who are dedicated to teaching God's Word in insightful and energetic ways. Please come visit us and bring your children. They will love our Bible classes, and you will be benefited.
Hello, my name is Dale Decker. I am one of 4 elders here at Seminole Point Church of Christ. We are very fortunate to have a Bible-loving group of Christians here at Seminole. We have 7 deacons that work very hard in making sure that those things that are not directly related with the teaching and preaching of God's Word are done. Our Bible class teachers are second to none. We have Bible classes for all age groups. Our goal is heaven, and we make every effort to ensure that the Word of God is taught at every age group. We hope that you will come and check us out. You will find that we are a very friendly and loving congregation. We are located at 16,300 May Avenue in Oklahoma City. And now back to our study.
We're back. One thing I wanted to note from the chat room, John makes a very good point. He says we need to start. Now this is in context talking about oftentimes we join the mob mentality. Everybody's talking bad about this person, so it must be true. So we begin to think the same way. He says we need to start a loving mob mentality rather than joining the other side. It can be difficult, but with effort, we can do better at responding to wrong with love, and it will have an impact. And that's a good point.
Very good point.
Conscious effort there. If some of your friends starts bad-mouthing somebody, you will start talking good about that person. See if you can turn it the other way. If, trying to help that situation out.
When you get right down to it, it becomes gossip.
Oh, yeah.
Love does not gossip.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. We measure what we say about one another to one another.
Exactly right.
Measure our motives, our actions, our words, and everything.
Which kind of brings us to the last and final characteristic of love.
How is that, Dale?
Well, and again in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and this time verse 6 says, love does not rejoice in iniquity.
That's easy
I'll
for
get it
you to
straight.
say.
Yeah, easy for me to say.
Iniquity.
But rejoices in the truth. And what he's talking about here, love does not rejoice over the vices of other men.
Yeah.
Love does not take delight when they are guilty of crime or when in any manner they fall into sin. And love does not find pleasure in hearing others accused of sin and in having it proved that they have committed the sin. Love does not find a malicious pleasure in the report that they have done wrong, or in following up that report and finding it established. The wicked person will rejoice in sin, but the righteous person will never rejoice in sin.
Now, I think about this in relation to the people to whom Paul was writing this letter. At the beginning of 1 Corinthians, about chapter 5 or so, we find out that there was a man in that congregation that had taken his father's wife. And I think the congregation there had equated their love for him to be, well, we'll just accept him. We won't do anything about it. We'll pat ourselves on the back for our tolerance and our long suffering. Well, that wasn't the love that God required of them.
No.
And they were supposed to rebuke him and turn him away from that, not revel in the fact, not rejoice in the fact that he was doing what he was doing.
Well, that's exactly right. And so in essence, they were wicked people because they were rejoicing in sin.
That's right. That's right.
And Psalms 10 verse 3 says, for the wicked boast of his heart's desire, he blesses the greedy and renounces the Lord. And then an interesting reading when Paul was talking to the church at Rome in Romans the 1st chapter verses 27 through 32, he says, likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. This would be the wicked person rejoicing in sin.
That's right. That's a good passage that helps to illustrate that so much so.
Yeah.
There was a comment that came up in the chat room earlier, and somehow or another I missed it. I had scanned through the first part of it, but Brother Rosalito had said, we will love our father and mother, our sons and daughter in the way of the Lord. Then he says, there are so many gospel, this is what I missed earlier, there are so many gospel preachers who have, quote unquote, what we would say two faces. They're good in the church, but in the example he uses, but not in their own family. And John, he says we need. Then he comes back and says, Rosalito, very unfortunate, but often true that those we look to for teaching us what we should be spiritually don't seem to live up to the same standards. I've known of gospel preachers who will go and hold gospel meetings, and while they're holding the gospel meeting, be having an affair. Gospel preachers who would stand up and they'd speak godly words from the pulpit, but then when you get them around and every day out on the farm activity and so forth, their language would be no different from the world. You know, and especially I like his point of the reference to the way they treat their family.
Exactly right.
I think it's a good example of that.
Well, I've seen a number of preachers that have literally lost their family because they spend so much time working with the congregation. and not balancing their life and remembering what God said. We have a responsibility towards our family. We have a responsibility to raise our children up in the Lord, train a child in the way he ought to go, and he will not depart from the way. But if we don't do that, and we divert all of our attention somewhere else, then we've missed the point. We've missed the target.
That's absolutely right. That's a very good point. Well, Dale, I think there's one more thing we need to mention in relation to love, not rejoicing in iniquity, but it rejoices in truth.
Well, that's exactly right. Love rejoices in the truth. Everything that is opposite to falsehood and irreligion. Those who are filled with the love of God and man rejoice in the propagation and extension of divine truth in the spread of true religion, by which alone peace and good will can be diffused throughout the earth. And because they rejoice in the truth, therefore they do not persecute nor hinder true religion, but instead they will help it forward with all their might and with all their power. 2 John verse 4 says, I rejoice greatly that I have found some of your children walking in truth, as we receive commandment from the Father.
I think that's a good point. Very good point. Well, we are down to about 7 minutes left. So, Dale, let's look at a summary, if you would. Paul summarizes love in 1 Corinthians 13, 7 through 8. What does he say there about that?
Well, he says, love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. So if you break that down and you look at each area, when he says love bears all things, what Paul is talking about here is love conceals everything that should be concealed. It betrays no secret. It retains the grace given and goes on to continual increase. A person under the influence of this love never makes the sins or the follies or faults or imperfections of any man the subject either of censure or conversation. And he covers them as far as he can, and if alone privy to them, he retains the knowledge of them in his own bosom as far as he ought.
I think that's a good explanation of the bearing all things. I think about the Apostle Paul in his letter to the church in Rome in Romans 14. There are instances where we bear with our weaker brethren.
Mm-hmm.
And bear with the scruples, I think, is one translation refers to it as, because of the love we have for them. What about the believes all thing, though, Dale? What would you say believes all thing kind of refers to?
Well, it must mean that in regard to the conduct of others, there is a disposition to put the best construction on it, to believe that they may be actuated by good motives and that they intend no injury, that there is a willingness to suppose, as far as can be, that what is done consistently with friendship, a good feeling and virtue. Love produces this because it rejoices in the happiness and the virtue of others.
You know, and I think these are what we have to keep in mind as we walk through this particular summation of love, is that he's talking about the love that we have for one another. It is the agape love, obviously. But he's addressing the love that we have in our relationship with one another. At the end of verse 12, he says, I show you a more excellent way.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And that's what we're looking at. So that's important to understand. We talk about bears all things, believes all things. It's in relationship or reference to our relationship with one another as Christians. And even hopes all things, Dale.
That's correct. When Paul says that love hopes all things, what he's talking about here is love actually looks for improvement in the bad, hopes that all will return out well. And this must also refer to the conduct of others. It means that however dark may be appearances, how much so ever there may be to produce the fear that others are actuated by improper motives or bad men. Yet that there is a hope that matters may be explained and made clear, that the difficulties may be made to vanish, and that the conduct of others may be made to appear to be fair and pure. The idea is that love will hold on to this hope until all possibility of such a result has vanished, and it is compelled to believe that the conduct is not susceptible of a fair explanation. This hope will extend to all things. It will extend to words and to actions and plans and to public and to private intercourse, to what is said and done in our own presence, and to what is said and done in our absence as well. Love will do this because it delights in the virtue and happiness of others and will not credit anything to the contrary unless compelled to do so.
You know, Dale, something came to mind there when you were talking about that and talking about love and hopes all things. And especially when you were making the comment about love holding out hope. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think about what Peter wrote when he says that that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God has hope that all will come to repentance. But the thing is, he's hoping for people to come to repentance. I thought that was an interesting connection between the two there.
Yeah.
Well, as we come down to the close of our study today, we think about the fact that love endures all, because Paul states that quite clearly with that. Mm-hmm. Bears up under, sustains, and it does not murmur. You can say that it bears up under all persecution at the hand of man, all efforts to injure the person, property, or even reputation of a person. The love is going to hold up there.
That's correct.
And it bears all that may be laid upon us in the providence and by the direct agency of God. Love will not give up, but as it goes, love will endure.
That's correct.
And love will never fail, Dale.
Well, yeah, he closes it out by saying love never fails. This love certainly, the reason it doesn't fail is because it bears, it believes, it hopes, and it endures all things. And while it does so, it cannot fail. It is the means of preserving all other graces. Indeed, properly speaking, it includes them all. And all receive their perfection from it. Love to God and man can never be dispensed with. It is essential to social and religious life. Without it, no communion can be kept up with God, nor can any man have a preparation for eternal glory whose heart and soul are not deeply imbued with it. Without love, there never was true religion, nor ever can be. And it not only is necessary through life, but will exist throughout eternity. And what was a state of blessedness if it did not comprehend love to God and human spirits in the most exquisite, refined, and perfect degrees?
You know, you think about God's love for man. We've talked about this earlier at the start of our study. I think about those people to whom Peter said in Acts chapter 2, verse 36, "This man whom you've crucified, God has made both Lord and Savior." So, that day, you had 3,000 people repent and ask God to forgive them for crucifying his son. Mm-hmm. If the love of God is sufficient to forgive them, then that same love that we are to have will never fail us as well.
That is true.
Great example of that, I think.
Very good point.
From our chat room, let's bring up real quick. We're about out of time, but I do want to throw this out there. I think it's a good thought. John says, too often, I think we hope a person gets what's coming to him for his actions rather than hoping the person repent and turn to God. So many in the world would rather see them suffer in hell rather than change and be saved. And then he goes on to say they've done something so bad that they're unable or unwilling to forgive them, and they hope God will not forgive them either. Definitely the opposite of the love we've been talking about here tonight.
Good point.
Yeah, most excellent point. Would have sounded better, I guarantee you, had you been here to say it in person.
Yeah, John, why weren't you here?
But we are so glad that you're able to be with us tonight, all the way up in Washington, D.C. And let's extend the reach all the way out to Columbia, Tennessee, and even to the Philippines.
Yeah,
we are so grateful for you joining us here this evening. Be sure to let others know about the study. I'm hoping that with the audio only stream, it might make it more. It might make it easier for people in areas where the internet connection is not very stable to maybe be able to listen to it. It's only at a 22 kilobit stream, if memory serves correctly. So dial-up should be able to listen to it. I've not tested it because I don't have dial-up, but it should work just fine. And this is a little bit technical, but y'all can kind of let me know what you think about this. We currently have been streaming the study at 650 kilobits per second. We could scale it back to about 500 kilobits per second just to see if it would work any better. Kind of let us know what your overall experience with is this. The problem with streaming on the internet, I mean, what we're doing is incredible. To think 20 years ago we could be doing this 20 years from that point is just would be hard to believe. So we're doing something pretty, and I'm not meaning just we, but the fact that we can stream like this is pretty amazing in and of itself.
That's true.
But if we can clear it up, but my point is sometimes problems on our end, sometimes it'll be on your end, just the way the internet works. So we may experiment with that. But just let us know. We want to thank you so much for joining us for our study. Dale, we're about to enter next Tuesday our last lesson in this series.
That's right. We're going to be talking about 2 Peter chapter 1, and we're specifically going to look at verses 8 and 9 and talk about nearsighted Christians, which is actually a summation of everything we've been talking about over the last several weeks.
Exactly. And then I'll give you a little bit look into the future. We're going to be, once we're done with this study, we're stepping into a whole different study, aren't we?
We are. We're going to be talking about Ephesians, the 6th chapter, where the Apostle Paul told us to put on the whole gospel armor.
That's right.
And that's going to be a very interesting study. I've thought about that for a long time. Exactly what does Paul mean when he talks about the breastplate of righteousness or the belt of truth? And so we're going to look at each one of those areas. But to do that, we're going to look at the Apostle Paul. When you get right down to it, you could consider that this was the most despicable. Thank you. Man, where'd my tongue go? Person on the face of the earth.
That's right.
But yet, when he was converted, he became the most godly person in the face of the earth. And he was the second most mentioned man in the New Testament next to Jesus Christ.
That's right. That's exactly right. I look forward to that study. And one thing I've not mentioned the whole time we've been doing this particular study, but this study was written by Dale himself. So he's done a very good job with it, Dale, and I appreciate it, and it lets me focus on some other things as well.
Well, you've got enough to do without having to do all this as well.
Well, you've done a great job, and I appreciate that. Look forward to the new material. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody, joining us this evening. Thank you for those who participate in the chat room. If you're viewing us and you've not yet tried out the chat room, give it a shot. And just see what it's like to visit live, to have this discussion going on, just like we are here, to participating with us live as you're sitting here and viewing us. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Remember, next Tuesday night at 7:30, the Scriptural Way broadcast will come to you again, brought to you by the Seminole Point Church of Christ, located in Oklahoma City. Thank you very much, and we hope that you have a very wonderful week.